Hey, I'm JD. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe, and if you want to get a hold of me for watch repair, contact me at jdwatchservice@gmail.com. That's right, jdwatchservice@gmail.com. So lately I've been doing a lot of different watches. I've done Bill's watch. I know he watches the channel now, hopefully, but this is Bill's watch. I still have to do a little bit of work on this. The only thing I need to do is take that little hand off up here, realign it, and put it back on again. So that needs to be done, although it's running perfectly. I don't want to screw that up, right? So, and I did this Rolex, which is a gorgeous old watch. It's a, there we go. That's a Rolex Explorer Perpetual Oyster, which means it was a dive watch. That's what Oyster means. And it's running right now, and it's a great thing. So I've done that. Shout out to my son, Pete, for that. And today I've got Brian's watch on the bench. This watch has been cleaned thoroughly, and it has been disassembled, obviously, before you clean it. And I cleaned it in my Pearl watch machine. It's a very good watch machine. Notice I'm wearing my Michael Jackson glove over here. Look at that. So, and it's International Loose Collar Day today. I didn't know if you knew that, but International Loose Collar. That's when you wake up in the morning, you put on a t-shirt. It has some branding on it right there, and you say it's really comfy, but the collar looks like crap, but I don't care. So today we're going to reassemble this pocket watch. The pocket watch had one specific problem that the owner identified, and it was a stem kind of issue. He thought that he brought it to a jeweler, and the jeweler tried to wind it with a screwdriver. I know. So that one there kind of didn't upset me, but I thought, oh my God, he's winding it with a screwdriver. Let's see if I can use a blowtorch too, and maybe you can loosen the case with a blowtorch. So today I'm going to be working on that. I know lately I've made some videos. I do simulation. I just said do by the way. And I bought an amazing throttle. Holy jeez, this thing weighs 10 pounds, and it's looking a bit like this. So I just prop this up a bit. So this is a master of engineering. So this is a full throttle with a desk mount. That's a beast. The desk mount is a beast. So this is what I've done lately. Just kind of getting back into my simming, which I've done for years and years and years. My daughter used to feed me snacks while I was trying to land a Boeing 747. So it's all good. Mix of watchmaking and high tech. So it is kind of funny how we can mix the something that's high-tech, revolutionary throttle for simming. That thing weighs 10 pounds. It's the Warthog throttle and 100-year-old watch repair. So it's an excellent mix. So it's very relaxing work to do. So anyway, if you want me to do any work for you, just let me know, and we'll get on with it. So let's start seeing whether we can reassemble this little piece. The setting mechanism was a bit off. I've taken some pictures of that mechanism because I've got to reassemble it in the exact same way. It's going to be the first thing I put together on this watch, so I'm not going to bother with any of the other plates or anything until I put that mechanism back together and I know that it's working properly. So thanks again for watching my videos. Please subscribe. Please pass it along. If you're wondering what this thing up here is, that's my microphone. So let's keep that a secret. So there you go, and I'll see you on the bench in 1 millisecond. All right, the first thing I do when I've got myself a really beautiful pocket watch like this is I make sure that I have a glove on. And that way the glove protects the watch a bit. I've got some comments in the past saying, hey, JD, how come you're not wearing the glove? Well, back in the day, I don't think the old guys wore gloves. I think that they basically didn't wear gloves. So the first thing I do here is I take the parts out and make sure they're good, and then I place them on the bench here, and then I'm ready to do the reassembly. All right, let's pick the parts out of the jar. So I've seen this called the grand wheel as opposed to the center wheel. I call it the center wheel. And again, I take these parts and I just line them up out of the way just so I can grab them later on. And make sure that your elbows are not near any of those parts, because elbows tend to grab parts. I'm not sure what that's all about, but they do. So, and here I've got my hour wheel. pull that out, and my minute wheel's coming out next. There it is. And you've got to be really gentle in these parts when you take them out. So learn how to use your screwdrivers. That's a dial washer. Yeah, it's early in the morning, so I'm remembering things. And then I've got case screws. I bunched them up even though some of them are the same, so I just basically, those aren't case screws actually, those are the plate screws. So these are just small plate screws that went through the wash machine as well. These are the case screws here, and I just want to make sure everything is perfectly lined up, that I don't have any issues at all finding those parts that I need to find to reassemble this watch. I'm hoping and praying. You should never hope and pray when you're doing watch work, but hoping and praying that I've got no issue with that, with the setting mechanisms on this watch. So after I've emptied the basket, I do tap it down a bit, because just in case there's something else in there that I forgot. So, and examine that basket, and then I use these little baskets here to put in the very small and delicate parts. And let me just pull these baskets out and open these little baskets here. I recommend these, by the way, because the meshing on the smaller baskets is a lot smaller. So this meshing allows you to put smaller parts in there, and there's no issue. So here I can simply dump the parts like that. And again, when I put these parts in, I tap the basket, make sure there's nothing in there, and then close the basket. So I know I'm done with that. And with the screws, so this is some of the setting mechanism stuff. I'm just trying to make sure that the screws are only used for the parts I need them for. So in this case, I've got this little thingamajobby doohickey in the setting mechanism, and the plate on top, and the world's smallest screw is for that, right? So I group that up in the basket so there's no guessing later on of where that screw goes. And then I'll take these parts and then line them up. I'll show you how they're all lined up after. And this is some of the mechanisms in the stem. There's the stem itself. And this here, I believe, is called is that the crown wheel? I think it's called the crown wheel. And this is the ratchet wheel. And I'm sure this one here is called the ratchet intermediate wheel or something, right? I'm trying to remember the names. So, but again, I don't tend to talk about the names of the parts as I'm putting them back together. I'm only doing this for your benefit. I've got other videos out there that where I've actually taken the books out and said, okay, what are these things actually called? So this is the escapement. I have it in its own little basket because it's a very delicate little object. Let's have a look at that. That's the escapement right there, all cleaned and ready to go. And you know, there's nothing else in this basket. I kept that isolated so it wouldn't mix up with anything else. If you've got other things in the basket that are heavier, there is this remote chance that that object will hit the other object in the basket, and then you've got yourself perhaps a problem. So I got a lot of stuff in here. Let me see, what do I got there? Yeah, so I threw things in again where I knew I didn't have a problem with identifying which screw went with which part, right? So, and I think this is the upper winding wheel, right? And with the upper winding wheel, you've got this plate that goes inside there, and then you've got this here that goes on top of all of it. So that's how that upper winding wheel kind of arranges itself. And then there's a bigger face screw for the upper winding wheel. So I know these all go together. And then I've got, this is the plate that holds the setting mechanisms together, right? And then this thing here has got a screw. So when I think, what screw is it? Well, I know these screws are exactly the same, so they likely go for the pallet fork bridge that I have here. And then this screw then would go with this upper plate. So now I've got no confusion about what's associated with what, right? So that's good. So that's how I do this. So I don't have to think about which screws go with what. So I'll just move these parts back together again and get them ready for assembly. And this part here goes with all this stem setting mechanism stuff, jobby doohickey stuff. I got to get a better term, eh? Things. I'll just call everything things. So there's my last basket. and there we go. And here I've got the ratchet wheel that sits on top of the mainspring barrel. There it is there. And the ratchet wheel has got a big screw. So that's the screw for the ratchet wheel right there. So I know those things go together like something in a feather or something. I'm not sure how that rhyme goes, but they go together. And then there's this little spring here. This is where all this fanciness comes from. That's the spring that allows the pawl, this thing here, to go into place, and this thing here to go into place for the winding mechanism. I had folks, there's the cannon pinion. I'll put that over with all the gears. And this little tiny screw right here, right there, goes with this little pawl right here. So that's done. I had people asking me crazy questions the other day about stuff like this. Like someone said that this winding mechanism is likely, winding and setting is likely one of the most complex ones in pocket watches. I think maybe the Valjura 7750 mechanisms are way more complex than that. But for a pocket watch, it is a bit of a pia, as they say. So it's not that easy. So last basket time. All right, what we're going to do here is just edge this thing up like that. I've got the mainspring on the inside. I don't think I need to replace the mainspring on this watch. What I'm gonna do is test the amplitude and see if we're good with amplitude. And if we are, then I'm not going to bother touching the mainspring. And here are all the plates of the pocket watch. I still have to do some looking at the screws, or sorry, looking at there's the mainspring barrel. I still have to look at the jewels to make sure I don't have any issues. Although, you know, with my airy loop that's attached to my glasses, I didn't see anything, so we should be fine. And there's the upper part of that barrel that I talked about in the last video, and that little cammed edge that allows you to fit that over, that allows the mainspring to slide over that and catch it. And there's my first plate, plate number 1. And I'll have a look at this plate as well. And for this plate, I need to take this the setting off, right? I need to take the cap jewel off here and oil that properly. I've seen, I don't have the oiling device, but I've seen folks with oiling devices where they can just pump the oil through the hole. Well, I don't have that oiling device, so I'm shit out of luck there, right? So what I'm going to do is take out my Myers number 58 movement holder, and I'll put this inside kind of like this. And I know I'm touching the edge of it, but it should be fine. Just like that. And that way I can work on this without, work on these setting mechanisms without any fault. I do have to check the jewels first, so I'll be right back. So as you can see here, I'm checking out the jewels on this watch. I noticed that there's a little tiny hair on one of these jewels. So I'm just bringing my Rodico in to make sure that's gone. But these jewels look absolutely perfect. So I might be able to show you one of them through a different magnifying glass, but I'm really impressed. These jewels look really good for their age. Generally very impressed. So it's amazing how much quality material lasts. With Rodico, I'm able to just take off. I did send this through the cleaning machine, and with Rodico, I'm able to take off little tiny specks that might be left over in there. So that just absolutely cleans it nicely. So there's no issue at all. This plate doesn't have any jewels, but I'm having a close look at it to make sure there's no issues here. And it kind of looks good. Let me see, flip this around. It's funny, there's a piece of metal that's shaved off, but I don't think it's going to cause any issues. It's just part of manufacturing, I think. And I got to bring this plate in here and have a look at these jewels now, which means I got to adjust my microscope. I have a camera that you can look at the jewels in a microscope, but still isn't clear enough, which it's sort of okay, right? So these all look good. Let me see. This is the escapement. That's the escapement jewel. And there's what is that? That is the pallet fork jewel, and then we have the jewel of all jewels. So that, yeah, that's got a lot of crust still in it. So I got to take this apart and have a look at it, because this looks like there's a bit of crust on the bottom of that. So if I turn off the light, you can see this a bit better. So that's how I look at the jewels and determine whether any replacement is needed. Now you can see how everything is nicely lined up here, and all the parts are nicely lined up so they don't fight with each other. So I've got to remove this very small cap jewel here. So I'm going to be super careful in doing that. If my head gets in the way, I apologize. But I should just be able to undo these two screws. Make sure my screwdriver is big enough. You don't want to use a screwdriver that's too small, because you'll screw it up. Pardon my humor. So there's one. And these screws are super small, so it's almost better to pick them up with Rodico if you can get away with it, right? So that one didn't work. It looks like it just pushed it back in. So I'm gonna see if I can unscrew that again and then just maybe edge it out. No, it seems to want to go back in, which tells me that there's a threading issue on these screws. There we go. So there it is on the end of the Rodico. So grab that screw and make sure it's out of the way. Now I only had one coffee this morning, which is great, so I'm not too concerned about rattling. Alright, that screw came out perfectly. And if you look at the, put that beside it, and I'm going to get closer here. Now if you look at this plate here, this cap jewel here, you see a witness mark right there. That's the witness mark to line this setting up with the jewel. I found that I can often remove the, what we got here, this in yellow. I can often remove the jewel just by putting my screwdriver in and popping it up. And so I'm just seeing if I can do that with this jewel. Be nice if I could. It's moving, which is good, so come on. Don't be painful. There we go. That's good. Now I can have a look at that cap jewel here and make sure there's no issues with that. So I'll clean that up, and I'll look inside here with my microscope and clean that up as well, just to make sure we're good. And then I need to oil it. So I got some bad news for Brian. This jewel here, which is critical to the watch, it is in fact the lower balance jewel in a setting, and the jewel is absolutely cracked. So I'm going to have to take a picture of this to show him. Alright folks, there you go. That's the picture of the lower cap jewel, and you see how all of the jewel material is cracked off of that. Well, what'll happen if you just simply put that back, like a lot of watchmakers would do, is that jewel, this jewel will eventually eat the pivot. And then you've got another problem, because the lower pivot is going to be in a very rough way, right? So I'm going to have to check the lower pivot on that balance to make sure it hasn't eaten that pivot and that it's nice and smooth. But this is going to have to be replaced. So I'm not sure if I have a jewel of this size. So the first thing I'm going to do is punch out this the setting here, and I might have a jewel and setting of this size if I'm really lucky. So it's now become a project. So to get this jewel out, I simply have to let me turn my light off on my camera here. To get this jewel out, I simply have to push it the opposite direction, and I'm using just a piece of pegwood, and there you go. That just thing came out really easy. And now what I need to do is find a jewel that will fit the lower balance pivot, right? So that's got enough side shake is not a problem, and then end shake is also not a problem, which means it's thin enough, right? So I do have a collection of settings, so I now have to look at all those settings and see which setting might fit, right? So this is tricky. I don't want to have to make a setting, but I can do that. But again, that's another adventure, right? So you want to be able to find another part, but you know, these are 100-year-old watches, so sometimes you just can't find that part, right? So again, fingernails are from my guitar playing. If you haven't seen my videos before, with the exception of my pinky, which means I'm lazy and I haven't done my pinky. And cuticle problems have something to do with scary movies. Okay, so let's have a look and see what side of fit I have on this on the balance. So this is my first look at the balance to see what I've got with respect to the balance staff. Looks a bit muddy, but it doesn't look bad. So we'll see. Yeah, it's a bit muddy, so what I want to do is I'll just lay that down so that lower pivot hole is in there. And this I can generally measure this because I've got pivot gauges, but this looks like it's way too big. This particular setting looks way too big for the pivot on the end of that balance. Like it's maybe the previous watchmaker put in this giant jewel so that they could get the watch running again and give it back to the guy. So it's crap because that hole is way too big, right? Because I would estimate this pivot to be probably a 0.10 pivot, which needs some, which would need some the jewel hole then would probably have to be 0.12, right? So, and I can just dust off that pivot a bit with some Rodico, like that, and just poke that with Rodico. And now the pivot's pretty clean, so I can have a look at that pivot underneath my microscope as well to make sure I don't have a major pivot issue. Because if I got a major pivot issue, then I'm into making a balance staff. So this thing is becoming a project pretty fast. So Brian, I apologize. So hope this is a family heirloom, because these things, as you look at them, you know, I could have reassembled the watch completely and said, here you go, it runs, and then 2 years later, if you kept using it, that pivot would snap off. But I'm going to look at that pivot under my microscope to make sure I don't have a problem. I'm going to have to measure the hole of that pivot, which I have a pivot gauge, so I can do that, or I can just fit the jewel setting on top of that pivot and see how well that fits, right? So let's get on with that. So again, I've put my, I should figure out a different camera configuration, but I've put the balance down here on my stereo microscope so I can turn on the light here and I can look at the end of that pivot to see what condition that pivot's in. So I'd say that pivot's not too bad, it's workable. It's got a couple of little scratches on it because of that jewel basically scratching the pivot. So again, the previous watchmaker, I believe, put in a lower balance jewel that was the wrong one. So I've got my massive collection of jewel settings here, and I'm just hoping one of these puppy dogs fits this. So what I have to do is go jewel hunting. There's all the settings I have. The worst case scenario is that I don't have a setting that fits, and then I have to actually make a setting, because I'd have to take this jewel out from the top because it's burnished in, and make a brand new setting that fits that exactly with that same lip and everything, right? It's all doable, but it's a lot of work. So it's like a 3-hour job, so I don't want to have to do that. So if I can find a replacement setting, then that's got a good jewel, it's good condition, then I'm good to go. So it's going to take a little while, probably about half an hour, to see if I can find that jewel setting. So it's nothing in watch repair is quick, especially when you're looking at vintage watches like this. So I'll be back after I've matched a setting. So the first thing I do before I start farting with this and matching the setting is I take the current setting and I put a red mark on it. And the reason for that is that I could very easily lose this setting amongst all the other settings. So I'm going to just see if I can put 2 red marks on either side, like that. So now they're marked. This one's marked, and I know that's the original setting. That way I don't get this lost among all these other settings that I have, and try to find the one that's perfect. If I'm lucky, what I do too is that I'll take this setting here, and the easiest thing to do is just put it on top of the other one, the one you think might be the right one, and then measure it that way, and then rotate it and have a look at the width to make sure you don't have a problem there, right? So that's what I'm doing, and I'll be right back after I find a setting. The other thing I may need to do is take, because all these settings seem to be pretty good, except they're not fitting into the plate, and I can chuck that up, right? Basically shellac it on and then trim it to remove some of the material if I can't find another setting. So what I'm going to do is put all these ones back and then get my next tube of settings and see if I've got the right one. You can order a setting, but the chances are you're not going to find one. What's going to happen is you're going to order the setting until I go to Dave's Watch Parts, because Dave's pretty good, and you may end up having to buy another movement, like an actual sacrifice movement or a scrap movement, so that you can use the setting on that movement, and that's it. But because I've got skills in making things, I can likely make a setting, even though, like I said, it's going to take some time to do. This is my second tube of settings. If I find the perfect setting, I've also got to make sure I don't have an issue with the this one looks really good, actually, with the jewel itself, because it might be the greatest setting in the world, and the jewel in there is the shits. So I got to make sure both are good. So I've got a very good candidate right here, but it doesn't fit in. So it looks like the actual setting is, the width is perfect, the depth is good, so I probably will not have an end shake issue. But it's too big to go into that hole. So again, I may need to remove it. I may need to remove material around the edge of that. Some of these other settings have shitty jewels in them. This one here fits, but I have to have a really close look at that jewel hole to make sure that fits. And I also need to take the existing, like what I'll do is I'll take the balance here, and I'll float that. Let me just move that over a bit. I'll take the balance here, and then I'll very carefully float that jewel setting over the balance and see whether that fits properly. And this is a really small pivot compared to the holes that so I'll just put that on top, and I'm just eyeballing this thing, and the pivot is really small compared to the jewel hole here. So that's a ridiculous, that's an overkill. In this case here, the jewel hole looks almost perfect for the size of that pivot, and so I might not have an issue here now. So what I do is take this setting, I'm seeing if I can do this on camera, and just put that on top. I have to see if the pivot actually goes in through the jewel, because if it doesn't, then the jewel's too small. And I think in this case here, I can almost see the pivot through the jewel, but it might be too small a jewel. So it's a lot easier to just fit the jewel in. And yeah, this might be too small, because it doesn't naturally just come right through. So this was almost perfect, but I've got to go back on the hunt again. I'll leave this one aside just in case, but I know I have to go hunting again. Now what I'm going to do is dump tube number 3 and see if anything is close. Now the other thing I can do, right, is I can take the setting, I can push the jewel out of that setting, right, and I can see if I can burnish another jewel in and use a Seats jewel. With any luck, that would sit in there, and then the cap jewel would be holding the Seats jewel in place. So it's not ideal, but it could work. These jewels look really good, but they're way too small. All these settings are way too small. So I was better off with my first tube and not this one. The adventure continues. So here again I've got a jewel that fits nicely over that pivot, with not a whole lot of side shake, but the setting might not be the right one. It may be too, it looks like it's too small. So it's going to cause, the setting actually looks like it's too big. So it'll cause me a lot of problems trying to get that thing set properly. So just pop that off nice and easy. And again, forget that, right? Because that's going to cause a problem. And the hunt continues. I have a feeling I may just have to, I may just need to push this setting, or this jewel, out of this setting and start fresh. Which I don't want to do because it's not easy to get a jewel that's going to fit in there exactly like the other one did. So we'll continue again. So this is my last hope in jewel settings, and I've got a whole box of these things. I can also look and see if I've got a sacrifice Waltham with a lower jewel in it, but not sure if I do. So here I've got like a boatload of settings, but again, is the right one in there? And again, hunting time. Okay, ladies and germs, I may have found the right setting. This is a great little batch of jewel settings, by the way. They all seem to be like size 12, like this one right here. So the trick is it the right depth? Not sure. So, but it looks good. The jewel looks like it's in great condition. I don't know if this is going to fit over that pivot, so we'll have to have a look at that. But when I threw it in here like this, it fit perfectly. There's no real side shake on this jewel. It's kind of snug in there. It's a little tiny bit of movement, but I don't think that's going to matter. Like, I don't think it's micro, right? So let me push that back out. So that's the setting there. Now the trick is, will it fit over the pivot of the of this watch? Not sure. It looks like it's in great condition, by the way. So if I just throw that over the pivot, holy shit, fits over the pivot nicely. Yeah, there you go. You can see that right there. See if I can maybe turn the camera off. I think it's better with the camera off. But you can see it right there. It's fitting very nicely over the pivot. There we go. A little bit lighter, I guess. So that's fitting over the pivot nicely, and it fits into the setting nicely. So that's a new jewel and setting. I had to look at, see if there's any, if it's rough at all, and it's not. So this is great. This is great news. So this should be able to go back in there, and I should be able to put the cap jewel back on. That'll hold that jewel nicely in place, snugly in place, and then we've got to go. All right, after much more work and everything else, I found the setting. The other ones were good, but a little bit loose. So this one here looks like it's perfect. It does go through. And I just have to check the depthing when I do this. So what I'm going to do is install this and then install the balance cock and make sure I get the right movement here, that it all sort of works, right? So that's what I'm going to do. So I think I can just push this piece of this jewel in place with a piece of pegwood, and if I'm lucky here. If I'm not lucky, I got to line it up and try to remove material and all that wonderful stuff. So it looks like it's a really tight fit, but you know that. There we go. Just you got to edge it over and then just push it in and see if that works. There we go. Let me have a look at that and see if it's flat. And it looks like it is, so that's fitting in nice and snug. And that's what it looks like from the other side, right there. And that's a perfect jewel. So the question is, once I've set this in, is the depth going to be correct, right? Look at that, it fell right out again. So it's a perfect fit. It took some pushing to get in there, but it just fell right out, which is nice. I like that because it means it's not too tight. It's not going to cause me additional work in fitting that. So it's funny that I had to push that in really tight, and then it just kind of popped right out again. And let me just see if I can do this again here and have some success. I think I hit the camera with my head. Yeah, there's enough of a lip on there, so I'm not worried there. Shouldn't have turn it the other way around. Oh, there we go. So now it's in place. See, the other jewel settings I had did move side to side just a bit. I wasn't sure how much problem that would cause, right? So, and I'm going to just put a little bit of, I'm just going to oil this just a bit before I put that in. And just grab some oil here and just put that right there. Normally I oil the cap, but I think this will suffice because it'll transfer that to the cap without a problem. And the trick here is then, is it gonna, there's a word for you. Is it going to work properly? I gotta clean the face off of this one here just ever so slightly. So, and to do that I use a piece of Rodico. Got to make sure it's actually Rodico and not a toothpick, because I do have some toothpicks here. Now this is Rodico, so because I've already sharpened it from before. So I'll just flip this thing around here and just get rid of any gum that's in there. And I look at it at an angle, so I make sure the light's hitting off of it, and that's perfect. Absolutely perfect. And then the last thing I do here is just touch it with the Rodico, even though that, yeah, you can see the shine off of it, right? And that's what you want. So here I need to make sure I line that witness mark up again, like that. And then this should push down nicely. There we go. I can see it's a little tiny bit higher than the other one because of the jewel height. So I'm not sure if that's going to cause me a problem. I'm not sure. It shouldn't, but you never know. So, which means I would need to shave some material off that jewel, which I don't want to do. Now I know this screw here fit really nicely, and the other screw I think is the wrong size, which doesn't kind of work for this. So we'll see. And if this doesn't work, I may have to go to the other setting. There, that's perfect. So that's going to hold that in. Now I think this screw here, this previous screw here, looked like it was stripped, which means I have to get a bigger screw for this. I don't think this will work. I'm looking at it right now sitting in there and it's just not doing anything. So now I've got to go screw hunting. So, and I got to make sure, if I look at this and the plate's flat, right, am I going to have an issue with respect to the actual dial sitting on top, right, when this thing goes down? So I'm not sure whether there's going to be a dial issue. And if there is, then I may have to shave material off of this thing, right? Which I don't want to do, but if I have to, I'd have to, right? That's the way it goes in watchmaking. So let me just see if I can find a replacement screw, because this screw too was really bad. So now I've got the Department of Watchmakers screws. As you can see, I got shitloads of screws. And the challenge here, this one's got a broken rubber band because it hasn't been opened in a while. The challenge here is to find a screw this size that fits into that threading. So, and I've got this one here. This here is one of my favorite collections of screws, even though the rubber band's broken on this one too. I got shitty rubber bands. So I got thousands and thousands of screws. So I got to hunt for the right screw now and see if I can get that to fit properly. And I'm still a little concerned with this jewel setting and the cap jewel on that coming up higher. So I don't believe I could find another cap jewel for that, but we'll see if I can fit the screw first and go from there. So I just hope you folks have some appreciation of the amount of effort it takes into even sourcing something like this. I haven't gotten into the lathe work yet, as I've kind of thought, okay, if this works, I don't have to bother getting into lathe work, which is a whole other job. And I might be able to shave some material off the top of that setting by chucking it up and then removing it from that perspective. See, just find a screw that's close to that one but a little fatter. That's the tricky part. So there's a fatter one there, but I think that's not deep enough. So I put that in the hole here. What do I end up with? Let me screw that down and see what I got. No, that's just continuing the turn. So the threads, it seemed like it was actually a good size, but just like the other one, the threads are gone on it. So just pull that one out. That was a potential. So I need to get one that's just a little bit bigger than that, because I got to let the screw rethread it. So I need the screw to be a little fatter than that. This is going to be a tough one, man. It's going to be a tough one. There's another one, but I think that's the same size. Is that the same size? I'm going to check it out. Yeah, I think it is the same size. They always seem like they're right, and then you go try it out, and then you're like, shit, it's not the right size. No, that's another bogus. I think that's the exact same size as the other screw. And of course you can pull it out like crazy. I'm telling you, that previous watchmaker did a wing it. He just did a wing it. So what I'm going to do is test this with the balance, and if it fits with the balance, then I might take the material off the top of that cap jewel, or take the material off the top of that jewel setting, one or the other. But I can put that in, and I can put the face on and then see if it all works. And if it doesn't work, then back to plan B. Plan B. So there's one here, but I think this is the head is too fat on this. So I'm going to go away, and I'm going to just keep working on this and come back hopefully soon. Alright, so that's the jewel in place, and I put the balance in, and it looks like it works. I turn it upside down for a second. It's probably not a great idea. So let me just screw the screw for the balance in, and then see if I've got myself cricket, as they say. I still have a problem with the setting being a bit up, so I may have to fool with the setting so it's not so tall. So I got to figure out what to do there, but I'm going to just put this in so I make sure that this actually works. And do I have movement here? It's a little tight. Let me just pull this back a bit. And do I have movement now? I do have movement. So it's end shake. It's just a little tight on the end. So if I remove a little material, that might move it down just a tad, and then this thing will work. The other thing I could do is shim it, right? So that's another way of doing this. The other thing I want to make sure that, so this thing is in, that when I put the watch face in, all the nonsense I have on the other side is still going to work. Right now I've got a screw that's way too high, so I'm just going to move the watch hands out of the way and take this face. I apologize for not having my glove on right now, but this kind of work here, I need the dexterity to do this, so it's not your just simple watchmaking stuff here. So here it's, the question is, when I put this back in, let me line this face up. Is this going to ride up too high? That's the question. So, and I don't know yet, so I'm going to just loosen these dial screws here and see what happens when I settle the watch face back in. Just loosen those dial screws. I got to make sure the dial screws don't get mixed up with the, if they fall out, they get mixed up with that pack of screws I have down below there. So that'll cause me another problem. Another problem. Jeez, man. This is quite the way to spend a Saturday. I think I'll end up making this video first, and then I'll deal with the other video. So I need to push that down into place, and actually it settles in place nicely. So that's in place, and the screws don't seem to be rising it up any. So the whole thing is do I have enough? Is the end shake good enough here? Because I think that I don't want this to be falling out of the hole, right? So I got to make sure that that's fine. And if I tighten this up, do I have a problem? Seems to be a little bit of a problem if I tighten that up. Just a tad of a problem. Yeah, so I got to look at that, of the end shake and stuff like that, but the dial does fit back on without any problems. So I'll call that a win, and then I'll deal with this whole jewel I have in there, and whether I've got another issue here with, I think that what's happening here is that it's going through, but the cap jewel is probably pressing down, which means the jewel would have to go down a bit, right? So that's a nice amplitude there, and if I turn it upside down, I'm still getting a really nice vibration there. So it's just touchy. It's touchy as hell. So I'm going to see if I can adjust that ever so slightly, right? I'm going to remove the balance again completely, and then I got to work on that jewel. So I think it's got to go down just a tad. I'm going to put that nicely back onto the balance tack, and then work on the setting here. All right, this is perfect. So in the end, I ended up switching to that previous jewel because it was a little lower of a setting, and it seems to be fitting in there nicely, and I oiled it, and everything seems to be working. And I replaced that screw on the bottom. You can see that right there, and that will not have an issue. It's a little higher than the other one, just a tiny bit, but that will not have an issue with the face. So this seems to be riding really nicely. So we're going to go with this. So that's good. So I think that adventure is done. Now it's all the cleanup. As I went screw hunting, I did find the right screws. So it's taking all these screws and putting them back, and I didn't have to go into my previous screw collection, which is pretty extensive. But I would have done it if I had to. So the whole trick there is to find the right setting, and then make sure the depth of that setting is right, so you don't have too much end shake or too little end shake. This is a setting I had used, which is a little bit fatter, I think, so, and these other settings here. So I'll keep the original setting, although the screw in that original setting is, or sorry, the jewel is all hacked up inside, so it's worth 0. But I'm glad I didn't have to actually make a new setting, because that would have taken a boatload of time. So that's that, and then we can start rebuilding the watch. So I just took the screw off of the balance cock, and I used my $1 billion stick to make sure everything was stable. And now I just have to lift this straight up very carefully and put that back onto the tack, the balance tack, and I've got a little bit of faux leather there, which is kind of nice. It just protects the balance and the hairspring and everything else. So that's that. Now I've got myself the jewel is in there. As you can see, I got myself a jewel in there, and that's the jewel right there, the new jewel. And the setting, as you can see, is right here. The original screw was okay, and I replaced the other screw with this screw here. It doesn't set down absolutely flat, but as I showed you before, it doesn't interfere with the face, because the other one was actually up higher. But if you look at the cap on this now, the cap is flush, so the cap fit back flush. There's the witness mark, and the balance turns nicely. So I think we're in business, all in all. So I'll move this over here out of the way, and then I put a plastic lid on that so it doesn't get damaged. And there you go. Now I'm going to put the old jewel into this jar here where I've made some jewel settings and stuff. So I know that, you know, if I ever need to do something with that, I can use it again. And I'm going to put the one that potentially fit. This is the same as the one that's in there now, and put that in there with this one here. So I'm just going to use this jewel jar holding, whatever, setting holding canister here, vial, I guess is the right word, to hold that. And I could put that amongst all my other jewels like this. And then the other jewels were in this, I think, but that's too small. I can't remember what was in this, but anyway. So this, I've got a whack of jewels in there now. So you can never have too many settings. I've spent years collecting and buying more settings, so I don't need to go into these huge batches of screws now. So, and these are vintage ones here, like these ones here are all vintage watchmaking screws. Very hard to get a hold of, but I've got like 1,000 screws in here. So it's always good when you have too many screws, and I've got a department of screws where I store it all. All right, we're going to go for a part 2 on this video because it's getting a bit long, and I'll continue the assembly of this. So we've got the jewel in place now, and everything seems to be hunky-dory. We shall see.